The Wizard of Oz is a story about Dorothy Gale and her three friends who are seeking brains, a heart, and some courage. And I would argue that this production of the show also needs those three things. Ho ho ho, my god, hey, welcome back to my Stagey YouTube channel. If you're meeting me for the first time, hello, my name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. And this is my Stagey YouTube channel, coming to you today from my boyfriend's family home in the Midlands, because we have been up to Leicester to see their new revival of The Wizard of Oz, Andrew Lloyd Webber's version of The Wizard of Oz, but more on that in just a minute. We're also here today because it is the beginning of the festive season, and you are probably seeing this video, all being well, just before Christmas. So I hope you're also having a lovely festive period, and Merry Christmas to you as well. So if you haven't met me before, I am a Stagey content creator based here on YouTube. I review productions that I've been invited to go and see, or that I have bought tickets to go and see here in the UK, and I talk about news and drama and gossip happening in the theatre industry worldwide. If you enjoyed today's video, or you like the sound of other videos that I make here on my channel, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of the very regular content. I have some very exciting plans for 2023, and I want you all to be a part of them. If you really enjoyed today's video, you can use the super thanks button down below to give me a Stagey tip as well. Very helpful while I'm making very regular content. Now, if after watching today's video you would like to review shows for yourself, click on the link in the description and sign up for a free account with ShowScore that lets you score all of the shows that you have seen this year. And also, you can currently play ShowScore's 2022 Year in Reviews, which gives you stats about all of the productions you've seen if you tick them off on their little list. And if you share that to your social media, then you can enter for a chance to win a £365 or $365 theatre voucher from ShowScore and Today Ticks. Also, I am dressed so appropriately for this video. This is my Wizard of Oz Christmas jumper. Look at this! Look how cool it is! Wizard of Oz, and also Wicked t-shirt underneath. I could not be dressed more appropriately for this video. I'm all over it. So I'm an independent theatre critic. I was invited to review The Wizard of Oz when it originally was opening earlier this month in December, but sadly, it being in Leicester, I'm not local to Leicester, I wasn't able to make it, so I didn't review it at that time, but we did buy some tickets to go and see it earlier today with my boyfriend's family, and Andrew Lloyd Webber was there as well, randomly. We were at the same random midweek matinee as Sir Lloyd, King Andrew Lloyd Webber, because he wrote the show. He's not been involved creatively with this production. I couldn't really vibe how he was feeling about it, but I think he was meeting the cast afterwards, which I'm just fascinated by. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to talk about this production in particular. I'm going to be letting you know what I thought of it, how this version is different to The Wizard of Oz that you may know and love, what I thought of the cast, and the very bold creative decisions that this production made. So enjoy today's review of the Leicester Curve revival of The Wizard of Oz. So to begin with, let's talk about how this version, Andrew Lloyd Webber's version, is different from The Wizard of Oz that you may know and love. So you've got the film, you've got the Lloyd Webber version, and then the version that's been the most popularly performed on stage is the Royal Shakespeare Company version. This is the one that is licensed for amateur performances. I've assistant stage managed a production of this before, an amateur production, and I've been in a production as well. I played the Scarecrow. So I'm very familiar with that version, but I've also seen the Andrew Lloyd Webber one before when it was originally performed at the London Palladium. This is the show for which he cast Dorothy using a TV talent competition over the rainbow, the same competition that gave us not only the winner Danielle Hope, but also Lauren Samuels and Bronte Barbe, who is performing in Newsies right now, and Sophie Evans, who has recently been Glinda in Wicked, and so many other talents. Oh my gosh, Jessica Daly, who's in White Christmas right now. So many of them. That's a whole video series in itself when we look at where all those performers have gone to. But there are various differences between the Lloyd Webber version and the RSC version and the film. So this production of The Wizard of Oz reunited Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber with his famous lyricist partner Sir Tim Rice, with whom he had a major falling out in the 80s after they wrote a bunch of successful shows together, notably Joseph and Jesus Christ Superstar. This one is a whole lot less biblical, but still has a lot of the previous charm. It's probably a better showcase of Tim Rice's ability as a lyricist than it is Lloyd Webber's as a composer. You know, the best songs in the Wizard of Oz score continue to be Somewhere Over the Rainbow and If I Only Had a, etc. The songs that Lloyd Webber has added don't necessarily elevate it that much and they don't stand out. I think the best moments of his compositions are where they pay homage to the original. So it opens with a song called Nobody Understands Me, which just establishes Dorothy's situation a little bit more. It means the first song we hear isn't Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but we have a song about her being frustrated with her life in Kansas. It gives us all of the context that we need going into the story, and it sets up the other characters on the farm as well, who will parallel characters that she meets in Oz. But there's a little section of that song where she's been singing, nobody understands me, nobody even listens, and then she sings, Miss Gulch is taking Toto, she says she's gonna kill him, which of course is a reference to the Miss Gulch / Wicked Witch of the West theme from the film. And that's probably the standout moment of that song. Other additions to the score include songs for the Wicked Witch of the West and Glinda the Good Witch. They don't get to sing nearly as much in previous versions of the show, but in the Lloyd Webber version, Act 2 opens with a song called Red Shoes Blues, which has some genius lyric writing from Sir Tim Rice. She's prissy, she's clueless, and I want her shoeless. And we can't forget the internal rhyme brilliance of when I get that footwear from her and it's put where it could have been, should have been right from the start. Like, it's so good. It's Tim Rice at his best. Excellent lyrics on the song Red Shoes Blues, originally performed wonderfully by Hannah Waddingham, my fave. And then Glinda gets the 11 o'clock number, Already Home, which is also very lovely. That number has evaded me for years because it was there in previews at the Palladium and then they cut it before I went to go see the show, and then sometime after me seeing the show they put it back in. So this time today was the first time I've ever actually seen that song performed within the context of the show, so that was nice. But there have also been some cuts to the score. So in the RSC version, there are some little introductions to each of the songs that the three companions sing, the If I Only Had a, Brains / Heart / The Nerve, etc. So the Crows used to get a little bit before the Scarecrow, where they sing, said the Scarecrow sitting on a pole, and he would sing, oh gosh, I memorized it, what was it? Said the Scarecrow, 'twould be pleasing just to reason out the reason of the whichness and the whatness and the whence. I had to learn that in 24 hours for a 24-hour musical, and now it's embedded in my brain. But that is gone from this version, as is the Lions Act 2 song, If I Were King of the Forest, which, if I'm being completely honest, I don't mourn the loss of that much. It goes on for a decent bit. The one I do miss is the loss of the jitterbug. Now this was recorded and I think filmed for the original film, but was cut from the film. It was reinstated for the RSC version. It's a big dance number in the second act because the Wicked Witch of the West sends jitterbugs to make all of our protagonists dance themselves to death, because it's a musical. Why would you not do it that way? Why would you not use a spell that makes them dance and do a production number? That sadly is gone from the Andrew Lloyd Webber version. There is no jitterbug song, although the plot point remains. They just don't really dance that much. It's curious, and I think that the second act could really do with the jitterbug number, because we want more dance, we want more fun company numbers within the show. Those ostensibly are the main differences between the Lloyd Webber version of the show and other versions that you may know. I don't enjoy the revisions to the book as much. I miss a lot of the charm and the wit of the RSC version of the book, particularly that first scene where Glinda and the Wicked Witch of the West are both sort of sparring verbally in Munchkinland, and the Wicked Witch of the West asks where her sister is, and Glinda says, yonder she lies, and the Wicked Witch of the West asks who's turned her into a house, and Glinda replies, not the house, under the house. I think there's so many just lovely, charming moments throughout the show that have kind of been lost. The bit where the Cowardly Lion says, I'm such a butterpaws. Like, there's some really great wit that sadly isn't as present in this version of the script, which I think is disappointing. So the original book was of course written by L. Frank Baum, and the adaptation was penned by Jeremy Sams. So overall, while it's great to have some musical additions to establish characters a little bit more, I don't think that this version is necessarily a wholehearted improvement on the Wizard of Oz that we may know and love. And then this production in particular tries to do something completely different with it. This has a whole aesthetic vision and a creative direction I have never seen before with the Wizard of Oz, and I'm going to talk to you about it now. So I was really excited for this production. I love the Leicester Curve. I love Nikolai Foster as a director. You know, they've been known over the past few years to do some really great work reinventing shows with these bold revivals. What they did with Billy Elliot when everyone thought the previous production was definitive and it couldn't be touched, I thought was really great. What they did with the chorus line to make it completely different to the iconic original production, again, really great. What they did with Grease, not to everyone's appetite, but I really enjoyed. So I was really rooting for this. When the cast emerged, I thought, great cast, fantastic, and seeing all of the pictures of the bold aesthetic direction they were taking. So to fill you in on this, it's very steampunk and semi-modern, and Glinda rides a Vespa, and the Wicked Witch of the West has a scooter with a sidecar with a little goblin in with a helmet. It's all semi-modernised and steampunky and slightly futuristic. And it has this fun, edgy vibe. Oz is not this lush fantasy land. It kind of parallels Kansas aesthetically in a few ways. When they meet the line, it's not in a forest, it's in a desert with cactuses, cacti. You get the idea. We have a lot of neon signs, a lot of sort of Americana scenery, and the Wicked Witch of the West's castle at the end is a factory that reads, I think, Wicked Witch of the West Enterprises, something like that. So like I said, I really wanted this to be great, but I do feel in many ways, and it's not helped by the Lloyd Webber version maybe not being my favourite, but I think possibly we ended up with a little bit too much style over substance here. So my final verdict on this production is that it's a 3-star production, and I have huge respect for anyone who decides to go with 4. It's probably a 3.5. I don't do half stars, so I settled on a 3. I think I felt too separated from the emotional arc of it all and those nostalgic Wizard of Oz moments. I think what they were trying to turn it into kind of overtook the meaning of the story, and we always have to have that in place. That is always going to be the most important thing, more so than the aesthetic, more so than your bold vision for redirecting this show. We have to have these characters and this arc and this story. That is the most important thing. So I said at the beginning of this video that this production lacked brains and heart and courage, and I want to defend those very bold statements here. Where it lacks brains is in some peculiar directing choices where just a few things don't line up from a narrative perspective. I'm all for reinventing the Wizard of Oz. I don't think it has to be done traditionally every single time, but there are certain plot points that you need to hit for the story to make sense, or it's going to leave us confused. At the beginning, when we have this storm, and they are talking in the dialogue about going into the storm cellar, we see all the characters run back into the house, and Dorothy is outside the house, and then we see a door prop get wheeled on, and she clings to the door, and then she gets transported to Oz. She ends up in Oz, and a house has crushed the Wicked Witch of the East. Now, we didn't see her go into the house, and the premise is that she was meant to go into the house and not everyone else. They go into the storm cellar traditionally. So that's a little bit of a confusion. Then when she wakes up at the end, she's in a random field. And not only that, but when she's in the field, she is wearing the blue dress that we see her wearing when she arrives in Oz that she wasn't wearing previously, and she's wearing the ruby slippers, which she doesn't really think much of. In the original version of The Wizard of Oz, she's in bed, and she's seeing all the characters around her, and she's thinking, maybe it was a dream, I didn't think it was, and then she sees the ruby slippers, and you're left with this uncertainty. But in this version, this afternoon, she was just wearing the ruby slippers, and Auntie M commented, what amazing shoes. No one seems concerned that she's just woken up in a field wearing these very expensive looking shoes in the middle of Kansas that clearly she's stolen if they don't believe Oz is real, and she doesn't seem concerned that she still has the shoes either. She's like, cool, shoes, yay, they're still here, they were quite nice, strong look. It just doesn't leave you with that same kind of enchantment, and it feels like a detail that's just been neglected because logistically they didn't stage it in a way that would give them time to change her out of the shoes or change her out of the dress. Another thing that bothered me, the Scarecrow as a character, he lacks a brain, but what he has in abundance is heart. He is the most loving character, and when they go and meet the Tin Man, he seems really apathetic about helping the Tin Man and about Dorothy because of the way that Jonny Fines is playing it slightly cluelessly and endearingly. He doesn't come across super warmly towards either of those characters, and we're missing some of the friendliness because he's just playing it a little bit too aloof. That's not a slight on him as a performer, I'm inferring that that is the way that this has been directed. Also, when they meet the Cowardly Lion, he goes and hides behind the yellow brick road. Now, the Scarecrow isn't a fearful character. He doesn't have the brains and the intellect to tell him that he should be fearful. He is very brave throughout. That's his whole thing. So he ought not to hide from the lion. I feel like that's a disservice to him as a character. Otherwise, he has a deficit of brains, a heart, and courage all by himself, and that's not meant to be the point. The Tin Man I have an issue with as well. When they all get put to sleep by the poppies from the Wicked Witch of the West towards the end of the first act, which are lampshades. Don't ask me why, but there's like furniture props and someone has a television on their head and there's a Coca-Cola fridge that dispenses snow. It's a strong aesthetic and they're leaning into it. It's a whole motel vibe because you go to sleep in motels and poppy. There's something in it, but it's heavy-handed. But when the poppies put them to sleep, the Tin Man starts crying, ish, which causes him to rust and he freezes solid in the way that he is when they first meet him on the yellow brick road. So Scarecrow is left as the only character running around and Glinda comes to help by making it snow, at which point the Tin Man magically can move again without them going over and using the oil can to free him, unless I missed that moment. But for some reason the snow heals him of being rusted, which is not how science works, and I know I shouldn't be applying scientific reason to a magical fantasy story like The Wizard of Oz, but it has to be true to its own logic. If the crying caused him to rust, the snow cannot be what fixes it. I know it's magic, but I have issues. And there were plenty of other little moments like this where I thought the direction from Nikolai Foster just missed a couple tricks, or the narrative didn't quite line up because they were too consumed with trying to do something bold aesthetically, or a bold piece of staging, and committing to the vision and the design for Oz without thinking about the logic and the trajectory of the narrative. Now, I spoke about heart as well, and along the same lines, it just got a little bit consumed with the aesthetic and with the redesign of Oz and of the whole story. I didn't get the sense of warmth that I wanted to. I didn't get the conviction from all of these characters. When Dorothy was leaving at the end, I didn't get the sadness and the sudden realization that she's going to be leaving her friends behind. She was putting on a really brave face for them. Scarecrow was sad and they shared a tender moment, but I wanted more of a bond between those characters. I wanted to feel more at that moment. I wanted to feel more animosity as well. Glinda and the Wicked Witch of the West were sort of like spiteful colleagues, and I wanted them to be a lot more combative towards each other. That was an odd chemistry and an odd relationship that those two characters had. I don't know if it helped that Georgina, who was playing Dorothy, didn't quite read as young as perhaps she ought to. She was very willful, she was very assertive, she didn't read like a young, naive Dorothy Gale. In all other ways, I thought she gave a fantastic performance, but she didn't read as young on stage as you might want her to. And lastly, I accuse this production of not having enough courage, and they take some enormous swings, so perhaps that's a little unfair, but I do think that they don't have the courage to trust their audience to be perceptive, because a lot of things are bizarrely spoon-fed to us. So I want to talk about the projection design that is used. A lot of it I think is very strong, but there is something of an over-reliance on projections. The last few times I've been at the Curve Theatre, there's been very few set pieces at all. They've just used the bare stage, which is enormous, and an awful lot of lighting rigs and scaffolding. They used that for a chorus line, they used that for Billy Elliot. I'm told it was very similar for West Side Story, so I was thrilled to see a set used. Here, they did just have a bare floor. That's never my favourite thing, especially when you're in the dress circle and you can just see the bare floor panels. That kind of separated me from being immersed in this fantasy world. And they had two screens, one at the back wall that had different projections on it, a huge amount of projection design used throughout the show to show different locations, and one that came down halfway through. And my issue with these screens is when a character stands near them and you have a spotlight onto them, then they get washed out and it just separates you from the story, and it doesn't feel like the setting is spilling out of the screens onto the set pieces that were used. It just feels like there's a screen at the back that's meant to be transporting us, but we all know that it's a screen. Where Beauty and the Beast did a really great job of blending their set pieces into the backdrop that was a screen, This just relies on the screen to do all the work. Now, the tornado sequence where Dorothy is transported to Oz, we have some extreme close-ups of character faces. We see the characters that they were in Kansas and we see them morphing, or we see them alongside the characters that they will be in Oz. But it shows us all of the Ozian characters before we've met them. It shows us the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Wicked Witch of the West. And it even shows us the Wizard of Oz's character, like the actual man that he is. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. We're not meant to know, even though we kind of know, that he is a real man behind the whole Wizard of Oz facade, and yet they've shown us already in the tornado sequence before we've even reached Oz. That was very bizarre to me. Another random little detail, I didn't love the Munchkinland set. It was very blue, but I wanted more of a lush Fantasia when we arrived in Oz, so that when she says we're definitely not in Kansas anymore, it's out of shock and awe. We didn't really do the sepia tone into colour thing that's been done in previous productions and was done famously in the film. It was just a slightly different vibe to Kansas, but it wasn't necessarily hugely unlike the real world. It could have been like Chicago or somewhere much more metropolitan. It didn't feel like Oz, this otherworldly place. Also, there was a sign that said Munchkinland, the home of the Lollipop Guild, which I think is Lullaby League erasure, because it is home of both the Lollipop Guild and the Lullaby League. Why only one would be on the sign, I have no idea. That seems unfair to me. That strikes me as a set designer who knew about the Lollipop Guild but not about the Lullaby League. It's weird that I care that much, isn't it? I hear that it's weird that I care that much. The projections were designed for this by Douglas O'Connell. The set design for this was by Colin Richmond, and the lighting design for this was done by Ben Cracknell, who also did the amazing lighting design for Billy Elliot earlier this year at the same venue. I did enjoy what they had done with the music. So there was a really bold approach to the music in this production. I loved that we had Somewhere Over the Rainbow ending with a bold, confident, belty ending rather than drifting away. That's not where Dorothy is in that moment, at least not in this direction of the show. She is assertive in her opinions and she is frustrated and she's about to run away, so she's declarative. She's not just whimpering something into the sand or whatever they have. It's a farm, isn't it? Kansas? I don't know. And the Lions version of the If I Only Had song, If I Only Had the Nerve, was really fun. It did kind of wear him at one point, kind of like how a costume wears someone rather than them wearing it. I felt like he was just trying to keep up with it. We weren't necessarily getting the brilliant lyrics of If I Only Had the Nerve because we were just getting him trying to deliver that song. The other one that was very different was the Merry Old Land of Oz, and I liked the way they did the introduction. It was a lot more theatrical and they had a soloist coming down and belting a whole part of it. That was great, but ultimately I wished that they had just repeated that whole introduction so we could get the Merry Old Land of Oz bit. Again, it felt like the song was then cut too short and I wanted a more fun dance break. If you're going to do that jazzier reimagining of the song, that funkier reimagining of the song, give us a really great dance break. It did feel like by trying to modernise a lot of this score and make it punchier and more vibrant, they just wanted to be doing The Wiz. And aesthetically, occasionally with the modernising and the steampunking of some of the set pieces and the costuming as well, it also gave more of a The Wiz vibe. And there were moments where I just wished that I was watching The Wiz instead. You know, you can update shows and you can make them into a different thing and you can bring your own vision to it. And I think creatively that's a wonderful thing. But at some point, you can only mould a square peg into a round peg so much before it stops fitting into the same hole and stops achieving what it needs to achieve as a show to satisfy an audience. For this production, the musical director, the music supervisor, and the orchestration adapter was George Dyer. So I do want to talk briefly about some of the cast. Georgina Onuorah was playing Dorothy, and I thought she was really great. Like I mentioned before, she gave a very willful and a very strong performance. She has an enormous amount to do in this show and a lot of emotional work to contend with. I maybe wanted a little bit more wonderment, but vocally I have no notes whatsoever. I didn't know how much of a classic lilt she has to her voice because very contemporary, but also has that kind of Judy Garland vibrato style underneath to it as well, so really perfect for Dorothy, and it makes me really excited about the breadth of shows that she could also be really great for. Christina Bianco might have given my favourite performance in this production. She was playing Glinda with her little blonde wig, looking like a Barbie doll on a moped. She was fantastic. It was every bit the classic Glinda with a slightly contemporary sensibility, which I think worked really well for this updated version of the show, and she was fun and the vocals were completely on point. It's always interesting hearing Christina Bianco's own voice because she does the impression thing so well, and she does the impressions of a lot of people you would associate with this kind of era. You're hearing a bit of Streisand, a bit of Judy Garland as influence, but it is her own voice, which is a fantastic one. She is a phenomenal, formidable vocalist in a pint-sized little performer. And I enjoyed the three companions as well. I loved Giovanni as the lion. I thought he was really fun, giving you a slightly different voice to the more traditional version. And I like a performer reinventing the role and not being reliant on the voice that's going to get laughs by itself. I thought he had a great characterization and his physicality was really fun, as was Jonny Fines as the Scarecrow when he was pitfalling and tumbling and giving you physical comedy. I really liked his Scarecrow. He was great. And Paul French, maybe the most interesting of the three. So Paul French is a rising star. I didn't get to see him in Greece, but I heard great things about his performance as Kaniki. He was playing the Tin Man here and doing this kind of Marlon Brando thing that I would not associate with The Wizard of Oz, but rather than just giving you like camp, cartoony sidekick, he was giving you like layered performance as the Tin Man, which had its moments and didn't always work for me consistently, but again, with all three of them, I liked that they were doing something different and going for a bold new characterization. It's more interesting to me than being reliant on an existing trope or something we're already very familiar with. I'm reserving the final applause, however, to Ben Thompson, who is puppeteering Toto. For this production, Toto is a little terrier puppet, and the design for the puppet is so good. Let me shout out whoever designed this puppet. Here we are. Rachel Canning, who was the costume designer and the puppet designer. This puppet is so believable, and the way that it's puppeteered by Ben Thompson throughout the production, it's so lifelike, by which I mean dog-like, in its movement, and it's so endearing, and so many just like little tiny moments. Like at one point he's being levitated by Glinda during the Munchkins song. It was just really sweet and wonderful and added a lot because so much of this plot, and you forget quite how much, is reliant on Dorothy being obsessed with this dog and chasing him around. Like so many plot points hinge on the dog, which is why it's probably sensible to use a puppet rather than a real life canine actor. But I thought he was fantastic and damn near stole the show. Yay for Ben Thompson and Toto. I would actually say that the highlight moment of this production is Georgina singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It is note perfect. It's a wonderful, wonderful delivery. I've heard that song performed however many times, as I'm sure we all have. Everyone has done their interpretation of that song, and it really made it feel new and fresh, and there was a vitality to it. The way that she performed this song, there was a desperation and a need, and it wasn't just sort of wistful and mopey, but it was intentioned and really well acted and really well delivered. And for me, that was the one really faultless musical number of the entire production. Every other song we had was probably a 4 out of 5. There was just occasionally something that I wished was slightly different. I'm enjoying the Scarecrow's performance, but aesthetically something isn't working for me, or I wish that he was costumed a slightly different way, or I'm enjoying this number but the orchestration is taking me out of it slightly. And it's fair to say this is probably a production I would enjoy more the second time. It's transferring to the London Palladium next year, next summer, so I'm excited to go back and see it now that I know what the changes are, because I think whenever anything is reworked extensively, you're just reacting to the changes the first time around and you're not able to enjoy it on its own terms. So I'm excited to go back and see if my verdict shifts slightly. Who do I think would enjoy this production? Well, it's not running too much longer at Curve, but like I said, it's going to be going to the London Palladium. Whether it's going to tour after that, I would not be surprised. This is a great family show, but by no means is it limited to a child audience. I feel like we all have a fondness and a nostalgia for The Wizard of Oz, and it still has all of those same classic songs and the familiar characters. You're going to enjoy this, but if you find the concept of a traditional musical a little bit stale, like I said, this one is really contemporary, really current, very much modernized. So leaning slightly more towards The Wiz. I think that you will really enjoy this as well if you're looking for something edgier and a little bit more exciting. So hopefully it can please both groups. But those have been my thoughts about The Wizard of Oz at the Leicester Curve. For all of my criticisms of this production, I think aesthetically it shows a tremendous amount of creativity, some of the most creative choices that I've seen this entire year, an outpouring of artistry and talent, and I love to see big swings and risks taken on a production like this. For me, they didn't all pay off, but I'm really excited. It demonstrates a lot of excellent work being done, a lot of excellent creatives coming together in collaboration, which is always the most important thing, and brava to a venue like Curve that makes that kind of work possible. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you have seen this production at the Leicester Curve already, let me know your thoughts about it in the comments section down below. Did you agree with me? What was your highlight moment of the show? Who was your favourite character? How great was Toto? Answer all of the above and more down in the comments section. Don't forget, if you click on the link in the description down below, not only can you read all of my written reviews that have been collated on my writer profile, but you can sign up for a free account with ShowScore and enter their competition to win a £365 or $1 theatre voucher from ShowScore and Today Tix. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day and a happy festive period.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!